Welcome to Olympian Water Testing, giving you the best in water analysis. Today we're looking at the New York State Department of Health ignoring EPA science and moving ahead with weak drinking water regulations. So what is going on? Today, the New York State Department of Health released draft regulations to establish drinking water standards on 23 toxic PFA chemicals. The levels set for these standards will determine when PFAS contamination is cleaned up and when New Yorkers are directly notified about what's in their water. Rob Hayes, Director of Clean Water with Environmental Advocates New York, said, "Under this proposal, at least 500,000 New Yorkers will continue to drink water contaminated with PFAS, even though the EPA has confirmed there is no safe level of exposure to some of these toxic chemicals. Since this proposal does not demonstrate the clean water leadership that New Yorkers need, Governor Hochul must step in. She should direct the Department of Health to lower New York's drinking water standards on toxic PFAS to as close to zero as possible. Why should New Yorkers receive weaker protections against these toxic chemicals than people living in Massachusetts, Maine, and Michigan? The New York State Department of Health proposed setting a combined maximum containment level of 30 parts per trillion that would cover 6 PFA chemicals: PFOA, PFOS, PFHXS, PFNA, and PFPA. Also PFDA as well, and individual MCLs of 10 parts per trillion for PFHXS, PFNA, PFPA, and PFDA. Also a notification level of 10 parts per trillion for Gen X, and a combined NL of 3 parts per trillion for 6 PFA chemicals, including Gen X, and a combined NL of 10 parts per trillion for 13 PFA chemicals. MCLs require statewide testing by water utilities and public notification and drinking water cleanup if exceeded. Under a combined MCL, the individual levels of PFAS covered by the combined MCL are added together to determine if there is an exceedance. NLs are also required for statewide testing, but only require public notification if exceeded. The proposed combined MCL of 30 parts per trillion is weaker than the combined MCLs covering the same group of PFAS in the northeastern states. Massachusetts has a combined MCL of 20 parts per trillion for the same 6 PFAS, and Maine in the process following the same course. And Vermont currently has a combined MCL of 20 parts per trillion for 5 PFAs. In addition, Michigan has established stronger individual PFAS MCLs than what New York is proposing, including a 6 part per trillion MCL for PFNA and an 8 part per trillion MCL for PFOA. So these are all good measures to take in place. And it's good to see the New York State Department of Health actually stepping up and taking some action against PFAS, because we know forever chemicals can cause a lot of issues, and that sometimes the EPA isn't always going to move on them. But they're still in your water, and that's why it's always a good idea to still periodically test your water for forever chemicals.